Hi everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to help you with writing your PhD thesis. It is a massive task. Basically, everyone finds it overwhelming, but does it have to be? Well, I'm going to show you how you can write your PhD thesis within 8 weeks, because I've written one within 8 weeks, just 2 months. And it's going to be easy, it's going to be doable, and let me show you how you can do it so it's the same for you. If you don't know me, my name is Matt. I'm an ex-academic. I used to work in academia in the UK for a number of years. I was a PhD student, postdoc, I was a supervisor, and then eventually I moved to industry. And now I talk about everything PhD related and everything related to transition to industry so that you can maximize your time in academia and make your transition to industry smooth if you decide to do that. So if you want to hear more about this, please consider subscribing and let's go back to writing PhD thesis. First of all, how long is a PhD thesis? If you Google this, Google will tell you, well, about 80,000 words. But is it actually, is it true? So I opened my own PhD thesis and I found that it is 44,000 words long. I also have my friend's PhD thesis saved on my laptop. His is 48,000 words long. Okay, so let's say 50,000 words in total. But let's think about it a little bit longer. As I scroll through my PhD thesis, the last 20 pages of it, so my PhD thesis is 171 pages, by the way, which is 44,000 words. And the last 20 pages of it are references. Did I write them by hand? No, no way. And you shouldn't either. So references took me a few minutes, all in total, because I used software to create references, and I used Mendeley. These days, I also use Zotero. So these are two referencing software that are really, really good. I will link them in the description down below. And they are really, really good because they come with Word plugins. So all you need to do is you need to install Mendeley plugin, for example, open your Word, keep writing, and at some point, whenever you want to insert a citation, you just go to the Mendeley tab, you search for the paper within Word, and you click cite, and that's it. And it creates an in-text citation, and it creates a citation, well, a reference within your bibliography as well. So it's just really just a couple of clicks. It's really easy, it's really intuitive. It saves you a ton of time. And even if your supervisor decides to change the style of your citations, of your references, it's really easy as well because you can automatically change the referencing style from one to another. And it's going to take only, again, a couple of clicks. So it's super easy and it will save you a ton of time. So my references were 20 pages long, which was actually about 9,000 words long. Okay. So I've written 44,000 in total. That's my PhD thesis, but actually 9,000 out of this was, well, references done by software. So I didn't spend any time on it. So I've actually written 35,000 words. But let's think about it a little bit longer. So, my second chapter within my thesis is methods. But I've written my methods throughout my PhD. I've written annual reports, literature reviews, all sorts of stuff. And some of them were methods. So I didn't actually write any methods when I was writing my PhD. I just copy pasted them. And then I did a quick quality control to make sure that I didn't have any typos. I tidied the text a little bit, and that was all. And now, if you consider this, I spent, probably about good 8,000 words on methods. So I think all in all, I've written about 27,000 words, plus methods, plus references. But I didn't really spend much time on methods or references. So the actual writing was 27,000 words. Now, if I apply the same logic and I look at my friend's PhD thesis, it comes to 32,000 words. So let's say that what you're aiming for actually is 30,000 words in total. So not 80,000 words as Google tells you, but okay, we have 30,000 words. You already recycled your methods that you already had written previously. You use software to write references. Is there anything you can recycle? Well, I'm sure there is. So I've written my annual reports, and my PhD was 4 years long, and after every year I've written an annual report. And I could recycle parts of introduction, parts of results and parts of discussion from these reports. And also, moreover, I've created so many figures throughout this time. I'm not going to make these figures again. I'm just going to paste them, copy and paste them to my thesis. So you see, so the task at hand is actually shrinking because you've done already so much towards writing a PhD thesis. But okay, let's assume you haven't done this. And you have methods, because I can't think of a PhD student who hasn't written methods at some point throughout their PhD, and you will use referencing software for your references. So what you're really looking to write is 30,000 words. All right. Well, you could stop me here and say, well, Matt, it sounds like you and your friend has written a really short thesis and you could have written so much more. And I'm going to say yes, sure. But let's break this down. So PhD thesis is your introduction, methods, results chapters, because you'll probably have few results chapters, and discussion. Well, methods are quite limited. I will only talk about what I've written. Same about results. I can only describe what I've done. And at some point, it will be all of it. And then, I can only discuss my results for however many words, right? So the only chapter that I could potentially write more about is the background information. It's my introduction. But please do not write loads in the introduction. Actually, what you should have in your introduction should be very concise and only on the relevant topic. You should only cite papers that you know, that you understand. Based on what you're going to write in your introduction, your examiners are going to ask you questions about. So you are essentially picking your own syllabus. So if you write a lot about processes that you're not familiar with, that you don't fully understand, but they fall within the broader topic of interest for you, well, okay, fine. But this means that your examiners will read your thesis, will read about these processes that you are not particularly familiar with, and they will ask you questions about it. Do you really want this to happen? Because in my case, what I wanted to do is I wanted my PhD examiners only ask me questions about stuff that was relevant to my data, to my results. This was also the stuff, the research, that I was very familiar with, very comfortable with. I could talk about it for a long time. They could throw a name, a surname at me of an author a year, and I would know what they're talking about. So these are the papers that I picked. And you should be doing exactly the same. You should actually limit your introduction to only the stuff that is relevant. So my introduction, I believe, was just short of 20 pages. This was the same for my friend. But I have a couple of friends who has written massive introductions, like 50, 60 pages introductions, because they thought that they had to write about everything within the field. So they did. And then they got absolutely grilled during their PhD vivas, because you can't possibly be an expert within the whole field. You can be expert within, your little sliver of research, but not everything. So save yourself time by only writing about what is relevant to your data, and then save yourself, anxiety during your PhD viva by not having examiners asking you a ton of questions about things that you're not really familiar with. So keep it short. That's a very important tip. So hopefully I convinced you that all you need to do is to write 30,000 words and then, copy paste your methods and use software to generate references. And this is it. Okay. So now I need to convince you to stop working in the lab, to actually say, I've got enough data and I'm going to write now. Because when it comes to it, you can't be doing experiments and writing at the same time. You can do one or the other. You really need to focus on your writing. And you can write your PhD thesis in 2 months, right? But ideally, you should probably have about 3 months to write it, so that it's just a little bit less stressful. So I would definitely urge you, when you are 3 months before your deadline, to stop doing experiments and start writing. If you are 2 months before your deadline right now, then definitely stop and start writing. If you have less time than this is still possible. I actually know one person who has written their PhD thesis in 2 weeks, which was absolutely insane. But for 2 weeks, she was writing over 2,000 words a day. She didn't sleep. I don't know when she ate. I don't know even if she had time to go to the bathroom. She was just writing. It was insane, but she managed and she passed. So all you need to do now is to stop going to the lab and start writing. So the problem with this is that you can always do more research. You can always optimize your experiments, repeat them, get cleaner data, do more experiments. There are always questions that you haven't answered. And even if you answer your next question within the next week or 2 weeks by being in the lab, this result will bring you more questions. It is a never-ending loop. And that's the problem within science. And this is why it's so difficult to stop doing experiments. But to encourage you to stop doing experiments, I know two people who basically just had negative data. I know one guy who wrote his PhD thesis, and basically 60% of his data was just negative data. There was nothing there. And then I know someone else who spent 4 years in a lab and got only positive results during the first year. And the last 3 years of her PhD were just very, very, very wishy-washy in terms of data. It wasn't great at all. So their PhD theses were very limited when it comes to results, but they still passed with minor corrections in the UK, which means they didn't have to go back to the lab, they didn't have to do extra experiments. They just had to, maybe write a little bit extra, explain something a little bit more. But that wasn't a lot of work. That just took them, a week, maybe 2 weeks, and it was done. Easy. So even if your data right now doesn't look great, and you feel like you could do so many more experiments, or maybe on the other hand, your data looks amazing, but you want to make it better because you've got data that is telling you that you should do this and this experiment, and you're really interested, you're curious, you want to know what's going on. Don't. Really. Just write, and when you finish writing, you can think about doing extra experiments. It might still be possible for you to do extra experiments. It was possible for me because I've written in 2 months, and then I had a month left, and I actually did a couple of experiments after I finished writing, and then I quickly just incorporated them. But that was me, and all of that is very doable, and this can be you as well. You can definitely write within 2 months, and it doesn't have to be stressful. So stop working in the lab and then think that you need to write 30,000 words, okay? So the aim I had when I was writing my PhD thesis was 500 words a day, okay? And that is a really nice aim to have because 500 words a day is actually not a lot. Well, it's enough to make you feel like you accomplished something. And if you write 500 words a day, every day, after 60 days, so after 2 months, you will reach 30,000 words. So you will write your PhD thesis within 2 months if you keep writing 500 words every day. Now, I wasn't like that. I wanted to have weekends off because I treated writing my PhD thesis like a 9 to 5 job, just like being in the lab. So I used to go to the office next to my lab, and I used to write every day, Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then after this, I used to rest. And over weekends, I used to rest as well. I didn't do any work over the weekends. And this was amazing for my mental health, and it worked very, very well for me. But the point is, if you decide to do what I've done, then you will reach 30,000 words in 12 weeks. So 3 months. But I haven't reached 30,000 words in 3 months. I still reached it within 2 months. And I was writing only Monday to Friday. And that is because there are so many chapters within your thesis that are actually really easy to write. So your results chapters are really easy to write because you already have the data. You just put the data in the Word file and you describe it. And then the discussion is quite easy to write as well because, again, you're just discussing your data. You know what your data means. You know what it is all about. You know how to link it to literature which is already published. So it's really easy to write. The only difficult chapter, potentially difficult chapter, is introduction. But I already told you that what you need to do is to only write about stuff that is relevant, that you're comfortable with, that you know these papers you're going to cite. This is going to make it so much easier to write the introduction, because you're not talking about things that you don't know, that you don't fully understand. You've written about these processes before in your annual reports. You read these papers, you know what you're talking about. This is all about, writing one sentence or one paragraph and then finding the right citation. And then again and again. So in my opinion, writing introduction might be slow only because you need to find that best paper. You already know about this. You know what happened, what is the right thing to say, but you need to find the paper where this information came from. So this just takes time. But that's okay. And you might as well just use one of the newest literature reviews available out there and literally look at the literature review, see what we're talking about, and then follow the order of events they have. Talk about similar stuff in a similar order. That's all it is. And when I was writing my introduction, I just picked 5 or 6 really good literature reviews published in really good papers, really good journals, and then I used them as a basis for writing my own introduction. And of course, I also had my annual reports, so it made it all so much easier. So rather than writing 500 words a day, most of my days I've written from 1500 to 2500 words a day. And then when I was writing introduction, which was going much slower, I was writing maybe 700-800 words a day. So in this way, literally writing Monday to Friday, I finished within 8 weeks. And even if I had a day, and I did have a couple of days, that I barely reached 500 words, I still felt amazing because I still reached my target. And on the days I've written so much more than 500 words, I felt amazing as well because I exceeded my target so much more. So I felt so much more confident about the writing process because I knew I was ahead of schedule. The next thing you need to do is you need to grab a couple of theses from your lab or the lab next door and look at the formatting, look at the structure. Don't pay attention too much to the length of theses because I've seen so many of them and they all differ in length, even within the same subject. So my thesis was 170 pages. My lab mate have written PhD thesis that was nearly 300 pages, and that is simply because she wrote a massive introduction and then she got grilled on it so much. So completely unnecessary. We both passed our PhD thesis and we didn't really have any corrections either. So you don't really need to write so much in the introduction. It's okay. So look at them in terms of formatting and structure, study the table of contents, see what these people were talking about, how they structured everything, and then take these books and talk to your supervisor and talk to them. Because now your supervisor needs to tell you how they would like to format your PhD thesis, how to write references, and they'll just give you, a few tips about how to structure the whole thing. But what you really, really need to get out of them before you start writing is something called, what I used to call, chapter target. So in your PhD thesis, you will have multiple chapters. So you will definitely have introduction, methods, and discussion. And then you will have at least one results chapter. Well, I had 3 results chapters, and I think most of people that I know had as well. So I ended up with 6 chapters, right? And what I really wanted my supervisor to do, which he was happy with, luckily for me, was to send him a chapter as soon as I write it. So I would write, for example, one results chapter, and I would send it to him for feedback. And then, a week later, he would get back to me. But we had a plan that I had 10 days to write a chapter for my PhD thesis, and then he would have 7 days to get back to me with feedback. And this was brilliant because the moment he got back to me with feedback on one chapter, then I would immediately use his notes, his suggestions for the next chapter. So every time I sent him, the next chapter, each chapter was better and better because I was receiving more comments from him. So this was really good. Why 10 days? Because I wanted to finish within 2 months. So if you write 6 chapters and you take 10 days for each chapter, then after 60 days, you should finish writing all of the chapters. And then you should still have, probably some time left, hopefully, to make any revisions and to make any updates to your PhD thesis. But the point was, I had 10 days to write a chapter, and then following this, he had 7 days to provide me feedback. So you definitely need to talk to your supervisor about this. And doing it chapter by chapter is much better for you and much better for them. Because you want to use their feedback all the time when you're writing the next chapters, and then you don't want them to check the whole thesis at once, because it will take them absolute ages, and then you will wait, and you will get so many similar problems coming up throughout your PhD thesis. Because the mistakes we tend to make tend to be similar. So if you make a certain type of a mistake in chapter 1, I'm pretty sure you will make the same mistake in chapter 2 and so on. So you can definitely gain a lot of time if you do it chapter by chapter, and it will be easier for your supervisor as well this way. So there are easy chapters and there are difficult chapters. And some people will tell you to write the difficult chapter, which is introduction, in the end, and other people will tell you to write it in the beginning. Now, I am against both of these ways. I think you should write it in the middle. So if you start with introduction, which is the difficult chapter, it will be really difficult to gain momentum because it will be going so slow, it will be very demotivating to start with introduction. On the other hand, if you want to finish with introduction, you will have the same problem. You will get through the easy chapters, the results, the methods chapters quickly, and then you will get to the introduction and it will be a struggle. You will lose the momentum. What is probably the best way to do it is to have it somewhere in the middle. So you start with easy chapters. So you build that momentum, you feel motivated because you're exceeding your daily goals. And then when you feel like you're there, you're doing very well, then you start writing introduction. Because introduction will slow you down. But once you get through it, then you go back to writing other results chapters, your discussion, your methods, and this will go much faster again. So you will go fast, you'll slow down a little bit when you're writing introduction, you'll go fast again. But when you're writing your introduction in the middle, you will still feel like, well, you have other chapters to write, so you can't slack with introduction, even though it's difficult. You have to get through it in timely manner. And then when you finish with this, you will pick up your pace when you're writing the rest of results and discussion chapters. Let's talk about Microsoft Word for a minute. So Microsoft Word is such a good tool. It can help you so much. And what you really need to ensure that you know how to do is you know how to insert a table of contents before you start writing. So go to References tab and click Insert a table of contents. And it will automatically create one, and then you can populate it. One way to populate it is to create headings for each of your sections. Now, make sure that the headings are in the heading style. So if this is the case, then the table of contents will automatically populate itself. And in the future, if you want to delete sections, change them, or add new sections, the table of contents will automatically repopulate itself, and all of the numbering will also be updated as well. The other thing that is also really useful is cross-referencing. So go to References tab and then find cross-referencing there. And when you cross-reference, you can cross-reference sections, tables, and figures so that you create hyperlinks within your text. So you click on table 1 and it will automatically take you to table 1. This will make it so much easier to scroll through text and find information that you need as you're writing. Staying motivated when you're writing a PhD thesis is a lot about the environment. You really need to think where you want to write your PhD thesis. So everyone does it slightly differently. So I used to go to the office next to my lab because this is the place where I worked. I associated this place with work. For the people around me, if I had any questions, scientific questions, I had these people to ask. And also, people were not chit-chatting too much. They were, focused on their work. So I felt like I had to work as well. So it was very motivating. I know that some people did exactly the same by going to library. So, when you're in library, you are supposed to be quiet, you're supposed to be working. There are people sitting around you, they see what you're doing, and that creates that accountability and that pressure to actually be working rather than, spending time, wasting time on social media, for example. So think about this. Other people decided to work at home, which is absolutely fine. I work at home these days as a medical writer, and this is absolutely fine. But again, there is no one here to monitor me whether I'm actually working, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So, you really need the accountability system. If you're okay to work from home, if you know yourself that you're not going to get distracted by your phone, by the TV. To be fair, my biggest enemy is my fridge because I just want to go to my fridge and I want to eat something all the time. And this is how I can waste time. So I really need to think about this. But when I was in the office or when I was in the library, I didn't have a problem like this. Right, I was just sitting at my desk and I was writing. So you really need to think about the environment, what is good for you, and you need to create habits, rituals, because once you create habits, it will become so much easier to just sit down, get in the zone, and start writing without any disruptions. As you're writing, you need to schedule breaks. So we're not machines, and even though our supervisors want us to constantly work, write, and create all the data straight away and analyze it and so on, it is not possible. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you know when to take a break. So if you work like me from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, then for every 1 hour, you really should take 10 minutes off. You stand up, you walk away from your desk, you do something else, do something different. You don't distract yourself too much, but maybe, go outside, look outside of a window, just make sure that you drink enough water, make sure that you eat something. Now, I'll be very, very careful with what you eat when you're writing PhD thesis because you're sitting all the time and it's very easy to start eating sweets or eat food that is rich in carbohydrates. And what will happen is that your sugar levels will go up and then they will go down. And as they go down, you will crash and you will start falling asleep. And if you were in the lab, you were walking around and your sugar levels were crashing, that would still be okay-ish. But you are sitting, you are not doing much. The moment your sugar drops, you will just fall asleep. There's no two ways about it. So I would really watch what I eat. So I would limit carbs, I would limit sugar, I would probably drink quite a lot of tea, make sure I'm hydrated, eat healthy, and take scheduled breaks. And also, in the end of it, you have to rest. Now, remember, I used to rest every evening and I used to rest weekends. Now, some people will prefer to take one day off, some people will prefer to work 7 days a week because they don't want to lose the flow. It's fine, whatever you want to do, you go ahead with this. But you need to make sure that every day, in the end of the day, you have time to rest, you have time to unwind, to think about something else, and to actually enjoy your life. Because PhD thesis is not everything, it is supposed to be 8 hours a day. That's it. And then you should sleep for 8 hours, and then for 8 hours, you actually should do something fun. Um, you know, maybe don't drink alcohol because you need to wake up fresh the next day. And that's what I did. I didn't drink any alcohol and I didn't party hard because I wanted to be rested. I wanted my mind to be fresh and I wanted to be creative. So just make sure that you rest every day because as much as it is overwhelming that you have little time left and you have to do so much, if you don't rest, your productivity, your efficiency level will drop. So, in order to increase your productivity, you really have to make sure that you rest and you start every day with a fresh head, fresh mind. So, find your own rhythm, write at least 500 words a day, have deadline for every chapter, and then have a deadline for your supervisor, a 7 day long deadline to provide you with feedback and just keep writing. Make sure that you rest, make sure that you have time to unwind, drink enough water, eat, sleep, and so on. And you will finish easily within 8 weeks. If you want to take longer, that's absolutely fine. You can take longer. But you can actually do it all in 8 weeks and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can treat it simply like a 9 to 5 job, and that's it. If you benefit from this, please let me know. If you have any other tips for writing PhD thesis, let me know in the comments. And Please remember to subscribe if you enjoy this channel, and I'll see you in the next one.